All right, so we're responding to our second topic today. Last night, we saw on Fox News website for 8 hours, their primary headline on foxnews.com was whistleblowers claiming USPS threw out backdated ballots before election. Joe, can you respond to that?
Uh, so 2016, we ran into problems with fraud, with counting, the delayed votes. Being a United States Army veteran myself, the number of absentee ballots that just don't get counted on a regular basis continues to be a problem, election cycle after election cycle. So this, especially when it's coming from Fox News, sounds an awful lot like the just grandstanding. They're looking for something that's always, they're looking at something that has always existed, will always exist. The question is, as Bill Barr pointed out, is was there enough fraud to actually change the results of the election? Was the ballot count that close that the hundreds or even thousands of ballots that were tossed actually going to affect the federal election procedures? Now, local level, working on mayor or even a district, state legislature, I can see it being important on those counts. But on the federal level that we're dealing with right now, as far as turning it into a SCOTUS case, turning it into a presidential candidacy issue, I think it's dead in the water.
Sure. So, but to your point though, Joe, if they're throwing away ballots, I mean, what if those ballots are cast for the Green Party? What if it's their opportunity to move ahead in the ranks? I mean, we're looking at the nation who is moving more towards other parties faster than we've ever seen. We've talked about it before with Angela, that we've had a surge of Democrats coming into the Libertarian Party. So, from your perspective, does that hurt your party?
Uh, in a certain sense, it doesn't. Reason why is you take a look at the demographics of who does voting in what stages. Now, most of you third party candidates like Libertarian, Green Party, and to a certain degree, the Republicans, they prefer to do the in person vote day of. Your more conservative voters, where you're looking at Democrats, they're good with the absentee ballot. They're good with the write in. They're good with early voting.
Sure. So
So,
we saw yesterday, as Donald Trump talked about this topic himself in his tweets, he tweeted maybe 8 or 9 different opportunities there, which Fox News has cited in this article of voter fraud. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I just thank God they're finally taking seriously this issue. I mean, this is not the first time that you've had signed affidavits claiming misuse during, improper behavior during this election cycle. I mean, Sidney Powell's lawsuits. You could dismiss the claims out of hand, but the fact is that you've had signed affidavits from tens of people in multiple battleground states saying, hey, look, there was a lot of problems here. And guess what? I mean, Bob Barr's wrong. The question is not whether or not ultimately whether or not there's enough ballots to change the outcome. We saw in North Carolina several years ago, you had an issue with voter fraud there. It wasn't, the question was not whether there was enough voter fraud to change the outcome. It was whether there was a systemic voter fraud at all, in which case the recall for a new election, because if the integrity of the election is questioned, then that creates larger issues. And more importantly, the problem is this, the mechanism for dealing with this. Like, if this affidavit is correct, and you had hundreds of thousands of backdated absentee ballots going into Pennsylvania, and you cannot identify which of these ballots are real or not, you have to start getting serious about the question of throwing out these election results entirely, having the state governments come in with their state house and putting in place their own electors in the electoral college. Because if you have massive fraud in these states, then the fraud undermines the democratic voice of everyone else. And that's not correct either. So again, there's plenty of historical precedents for it. I mean, election of 1876, great topic, personal favorite of mine, Sam Tilden. We've seen this happen before. And again, we cannot allow this again, why the Fox News story is important is because you've had all the major corporate press players out there trying to act like this is entirely a false narrative to begin with. There's plenty of stuff here that there's genuine questions that need to be answered and they can't be dismissed out of hand. And if we do not get serious treatment of this, you're going to continue to have 40+% of the American population believing Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. And again, personally, that's going to be a lot of fun trying to see the Biden administration try to govern a state like Florida when you have the majority of the population actively questioning whether he has a Democratic mandate.
So, Angela, to those points itself, in the article, the FBI is cited in LA County out there to be handling or leading their push into this investigation. when they reached out to them, per the article, there was no comment. They didn't say anything.
Well, that's because they can't, because that's an FBI policy. But I got to tell you, as someone who has litigated, lawsuits that have involved the FBI, good luck if you're going to try to rely on them to get any help, because they are not a super competent agency. I hate being put in a position to defend Donald Trump as a libertarian. I didn't vote for him. But the Fox News article on this issue, I think, is actually kind of misleading and is not really friendly to Donald Trump. It mentions that there are debunked lawsuits about voter fraud. That's not a legal term. It's not about whether or not a lawsuit is debunked. That's not how it works in court. This is just Fox News just pulling something out and just, throwing it on the screen. Oh, this is sort of inflammatory. It'll get us some views. Thanks, Fox News, for giving people misleading information. They called affidavits and sworn statements by people who say they witnessed fraud so-called proof. Why would you reference it that way? I know that Fox News is generally viewed as a very conservative news outlet, and it is. Make no mistake, I agree with that. But I don't actually think that it's been consistently friendly to their guy. I think it's been hostile. I certainly wouldn't say that it's unbiased.
Matt, to those points, I mean, it really cites a lot of the whistleblowers that they are putting on stage on these trials. We have video recordings of these whistleblowers themselves. Are they brave to come out and speak their minds about the topic?
The propaganda machine is at it again with this news article, with these claims of voter fraud. At the end of, it all comes down to the fact that we can't get it together enough to manage a global pandemic. What makes us think that a group of people can manage hundreds of thousands of votes? I have no confidence that these conspiracy theories are actually true. And signed affidavits as proof, please. These people are the same people that are marching with their AK-47s on the steps of the Michigan courthouse.
Yes.
Like, this is sign an affidavit saying voter fraud that probably will get thrown out later. Sure, these people don't care. They don't have any sort of respect for the law or the process.